Hi folks, Geoff McDonald here, and it's my pleasure to talk to Dr. Patterson Stark once more. And you've just been made a fellow, Patterson. So tell us about that. What does that mean?
Well, a fellow it's an odd term, but it's it's a medical specialty. And fellowships are granted to those people who've done the equivalent of a master's a level of work, a 2 years extra study. And my fellowship was done through the Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine, as done via the auspices of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and overseen by the International Bureau of Lifestyle Medicine, who runs the global response to lifestyle medicine. And so in that medical fellowship, it's again a 2 year course study of work on lifestyle, and lifestyle itself encompassing not so much how many push-ups you can do, but how are you going to change your behavior to do things more correctly, the way you eat, the way you move, the way you stress, the way you love, all of these things, how we incorporate this thing to have an effect on chronic degenerative disease. And we know it's the most effective tool because we have lots of science behind us. And so this was started back at Harvard back in 2008 by a guy named Eddie Phelps and crew. And they set up the curriculum that is now being taught in about 108 or 10 of American medical schools as a 100-hour curriculum in nutrition, in behavioral change, in athletics, in the stress reduction. So those types of things, even meditation is being taught in medical school now as being something that we know helps change behavior. And so when we look at things like today, we're going to talk about fasting as a component of dietary regimentation and disciplines that can have a massive effect on healthcare. It comes from my study as a fellow. Now, I've been doing nutrition for 40 years, but through this group of like-minded professionals, I happen to be the first chiropractor that's ever had a specialty in the lifestyle medicine anywhere on the planet. And I'm only the second one to have one in New Zealand as far as a fellowship in this specialty. There's about 40 or more in Australia, and most of those are in academics, so people who are in dietetics or research positions. There's not too many of us clinicians yet out here doing concierge practices like I do, talking to people on a daily basis, helping them change their behavior. And as we're going in this format, we're seeing that now these shared kind of appointments where we can get information out to more people, it's becoming quite a valuable tool. And the research is supporting it's just as effective as us sitting one-on-one and talking. Okay, so as we get there, it's not that I don't get to give you a hug, but we do get to connect. And it's that connection infinitesimally just as equal to having you sit in the room with me. And oftentimes it's more powerful. For instance, I'm doing this a group fast this week online, and so we'll have maybe 10, 12 people in a Zoom group. And it's actually get shown to be more effective if that happens because I facilitate the group. I ask the lead questions, I give the answers, and I let people know what's going to happen to them, but they get to share their experiences with each other. And as they share their experiences, they create community. And there are people that, well, I would never think of asking that, but now that you brought that up, it's a good idea. I never thought, now I know. And the other people are saying, well, I was too shy to ask that, but somebody else did, and that's a good thing. And over the course of the 6 days that we're going to do this, by the end of it, people are going to be making links with each other and talking about other things too. So that's something you can't do in a one-on-one situation in a doctor's office because it's so exclusive. And if you didn't ask the question in your 15 minutes, or your hour if you're here, if you ask the question, then you're kind of, oh gosh, what can I do now? I'm stuck. But when you have 12 people asking questions and you have time to respond to that, you now get an hour or so of this immersion with a higher level of authority with somebody that knows what they're talking about, but disseminating it through a bunch of people that brings up the baseline. It's really fun. So I polished off the fellowship and I've been to conferences internationally, and it's just a phenomenal fraternity of people who are on the cutting edge of science right now, reversing diabetes, reversing heart disease, reversing cancer, reversing Alzheimer's disease with lifestyle. So
that is spectacular. And I guess one thing that draws me to this conversation is, so I track trends, and I'm always writing books and mapping where I think things are going and what's showing up on the radar. And fasting's been showing up for me the last couple of years. So it's kind of, what is this spectacular thing? Because whenever I've either done it or spoken about it, I get some really weird reactions from people. So like everyone goes, what about your blood sugar? So can you tell us why fasting has hit a reemergence, and how do we do it?
Well, there's a couple of things that have happened. Number one, it's kind of like the archaeologists have just uncovered the wheel, okay, as we were kind of joking before. It's like, this is not new science. Fasting is in every religion and book in the world. It's 5,000 years old in the written language at least. And we know that the body is designed to do it. But if we take a medical look back at what the body actually does in a fasting state, we're quite surprised that, we're quite unique among our other mammals, okay? Like if you fast a rat for 3 days, it will die, okay?
Really?
It doesn't have the ability to go into ketosis like we do, okay? And it doesn't have the ability to live off its own muscle tissue as much as we do. And so when we go through a fast, the physiology is, first off, we have sugar in our liver, and we run out of that sugar. If we're running a marathon, we hit the wall, right? We run out of sugar in our liver and our muscles, we hit the wall, and we flip into starting to cannibalize our own protein. And that's the second phase. And then in a fasting state, that generally happens in day 2, okay? Day 1, just sitting around that side. In a marathon, it happens at about 18 miles, okay? That's the wall. But during a fasting state, just sitting around doing your normal things, day 2, you start to cannibalize some muscle. And you'll lose that 300-400 grams of muscle that second day. And then your body starts to cannibalize fat. And it spares protein. Because look, we need muscle. That gets us out of the way of lions and tigers and bears. So it's very important to be able to have our muscle. We're going to preserve muscle. We're going to start to burn fat. And even somebody who has a BMI of about 20, very thin by local standards, so to speak, they can last for 10 to 30 days to 40 days without any food, because we have that much fat stored in us. And we tend to lose about 300 grams of fat a day, and maybe up to a half a kilo of body weight a day when we're on a water-only fast. So at day 3, you're into ketosis. Generally, energy picks up a bit, and you're burning fat, and you can maintain that state. Now, beyond that, beyond 3 days, we like to medically supervise this, because we're kind of an unhealthy general population. And people can have arrhythmias, and most people are on medications of some kind that have to be regulated. There's things that can happen, and as your digestive tract shuts down, it's a very interesting thing that happens. Now, you might be interested to know that 70% of your metabolic energy is used on digesting your food and keeping your digestive tract going. And going, well, that's a lot of energy. Yes, it is. And we do this, the average person eats for about 14.5 to 15 hours a day. Okay, so they're constantly grazing. Now, nowhere in our anthropological, historical background have we ever had 3 meals a day, let alone 4. Okay, so it was snacks included. Okay, so our digestive tracts have never had the chance to shut down. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, what's that 70% energy do when the digestive tract shuts down and you eat once a day or twice a day, or every 3rd day you miss a meal because you just weren't that successful on hunting and gathering? Well, what happens is that 70% goes into what's called the autophagy system. The autophagy is where you break down your own cellular debris and recycle that stuff. Now, you would probably be interested to know that about 70% of what you're made of, all these new cells that you get every day, are made of old cells. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have a very efficient recycling system. But what about the 30% of crap that doesn't get taken away? Well, that has to be taken out of your body through various means, all right? And so when you don't eat, and 70% of that energy now goes into your lymphatic and humoral system, into your blood system, and starts putting its energy into there, you get very efficient at clearing this stuff out. So for instance, on a day 3 of a water fast, you've taken out 1/3 of your immune system. It's gone. Those cells were gonna die. They're called senescent cells, and they were actually on the way out anyway, but they were still kind of not very efficient, but they're taking up room. Now they're gone, okay? And that's a great thing, because as soon as you start refeeding, the body goes, okay, we've done 2 things. We're not going to let you reproduce during a fast, and we're not going to let you make a lot of new cells. So now that we got some food coming on board, we're going to make something called a stem cell. We're going to create new white blood cells. We're going to create new red blood cells. We're going to create new muscle cells, new brain cells. We're going to start this renaissance. And that can come up 10 to 20 times more stem cells during that refeeding period. Now you can compare this 70% efficiency of metabolism going into cleaning out the corners that never happened before. And all of a sudden now you have this increase in stem cells the following few days after you're refeeding, and it's a phenomenal boon to the body. Most people have never been in this state, and yet every aspect of biology that we know, from a 2 billion year old fungus, has a set of genes that do the same thing. It's too hot, they don't reproduce. It's too cold, they don't reproduce. Not enough food, they don't reproduce. They save their energy, they go into alternate energy. They start to cannibalize a little of their own stores, and they make it through. They go dormant. Everything, and these are called sirtuin genes, and they've only been the subject of research in the last decade roughly. They've been known about a couple decades, but they really gain momentum. And where this comes into fasting is that fasting is one of the mechanisms that turn them on. These sirtuin genes that have been dormant over the 3 meal a day lifestyle. And of course, chronic degenerative disease goes up. What they find is that people who regularly fast have less chronic degenerative disease, particularly heart disease and cancer, which are our 2 biggest killers. And so this is pretty interesting stuff. And so as we go along in this, we say, well, fasting may have some medical ramifications. We might be able to use this to help. And this is where it started in chemotherapeutics, where they're putting people on chemotherapy. They found that when people were fasting for 48 hours prior to going on chemotherapy, the epigenetic upregulation of cancer was turned off. In other words, it was making cancer a very stressful situation when you didn't have, regular feeds of energy coming in. As you would imagine, that seems logical, right? Yeah. But what was illogical was that the body's ability to protect itself from chemotherapy was greatly enhanced. Because the sirtuin gene said, look, we're not getting fed, we're going to knuckle down for the hard road here, and chemotherapy is just another threat to us, so we're going to actually preserve our cells. And so what they're finding is that there's much less damage to the host, i.e. the person under chemotherapy, and much more damage to the cancer. So this initial insight said, okay, we're the pharmacy companies that said, this is good for business, right? If we can use more of our drug and not hurt people as much and get a better clinical result, that's a good thing. So they're starting to do this fundamental research now into fasting and saying, how does it actually work? Should you not eat for 16 hours a day? Should you not eat 1 day a week? Could you go 3 days once a month or twice a year? One of the great doctors in fasting, Dr. Michael Clapper, who was the head of the Far North Health Center in California, started by chiropractor Alan Goldhammer. he was a medical director there, and they do in-house fasting. In other words, people come in there and they do water fasting in a supervised, controlled environment. They're medically checked twice a day. Everything's looked after, and they go for 10, 15, 20 days on water fast. Okay.
Mm.
And he said, look, if a person can go 7 to 10 days once a year on a water fast, they're virtually assured of never having cancer.
Wow.
It has that much of an effect on their autophagic system, cleaning out their thing and making their immune system up to 10 times stronger in surveillance throughout the thing. So fasting is here to stay. We're just now getting in that zone of medically managing it and saying, okay, how do we do it better? How often do we do it? And I've been taking groups of people through this sort of introduction inside and outside of my practice. And it's online, outside of my practice, and inside my practice with patients who are undergoing either regenerative things like myself. I did a 7-day water fast this year just to see, okay, I got to experiment on myself. And never felt better. It's just been a real interest about not so much the physiology of the doctor laboratory test stuff, because those were, you kind of know what's going to happen there. Things are going to get better. But one of the psychological things that happened to me and to Gail, my partner, who did an 8-day water fast, was that our relationship with food changed.
Mm.
We're a whole foods, plant-based diet. Okay, that's fine. And all those starches feed our bacteria as we get that digestive tract slowly started again and re-blooming and being healthy. We realize that it's okay to skip a meal now and then. Okay, we can go 7-8 days without eating. We're not going to die. It's like, oh my gosh, what about my blood sugar? As we say, oh, your blood sugar is fine. It probably better than fine, probably a little bit past fine. Okay. Oddly enough, the average blood sugar in adult male, female today is 1 whole point higher than it was 40 years ago. Okay, so if the average was 4.5 40 years ago, so now it's 5.5. And that 5.6 is considered questionable for prediabetes, okay? So our entire diabegenic society is moving towards that curve of obesity, diabesity, and these are things caused by our eating habits and the quality of foods that we're eating. So when we get back in touch, one of the unmentioned saving graces of fasting is an increased confidence in your ability to, you're going to choose foods that make you feel good, which is generally a whole foods, plant-based diet. And secondarily, you're going to get a tangible result from that. You're going to feel good. And you go, oh, that's how it's actually supposed to work. You're supposed to eat, go 3.5 hours, 4 hours, all that food gets digested, go another couple hours without eating, and go, oh, that feels good. Then eat again, and then, all of a sudden you go, 14, 16 hours overnight until the next day, and all of a sudden you realize, hey, I'm clean, I'm refreshed, I had a workout this morning, and I didn't even have any food, I just had water, I feel great, and your immune system is sparked up. So it's a phenomenal process. And as you can tell, I'm a little invested in it because I've done it and have patients doing it right now too.
Well, I think those results are extraordinary. There's no other word. They're just out of ordinary. The way I've been looking at fasting is it's kind of like we keep turning to technology for all the answers, all these external things. So in the stem cell stuff was so revolutionary 10 years ago, and they all kept looking at how they could get it in the lab, and yet built into our system, we've got an automatic way to do it for ourselves. And it's like, how obvious is that once you realize that?
Oh, it is, exactly. And anytime we try to reverse engineer stuff and put it into pharmacy and give it to the body, like interferon, which is a naturally produced product, we run into harm's way, okay? Very, very touchy stuff to work with. We don't have the smarts yet, but yet don't feed the body, and all of a sudden it turns down its pro-inflammatory enzymes, it turns out it's anti-inflammatories, you clean things. I had a patient who did a 3-day fast with us, And she was sure she was on a road for having hip replacements because she has such bad hip pain. She did a little 3-day fast. And here we are a couple months later, and she hasn't had pain since, and she's out walking every day, having a blast. And she's in her early 60s, having a great time. And just that intrinsic control. And we're talking somebody who's probably on analgesics prior to that, which were pretty strong, but her body came back even stronger. Okay. My partner Gail, she's had severe adult onset asthma, and under the care of a specialist. And there's an enzyme that a cell that you can measure. It's called the eosinophil, and it's generally a register of how acute your asthma is. And generally, we like to see eosinophils down below 2 or so on the scale, and hers would normally be up, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And quite reactive to dogs and cats and things in the environment. And always been that way, on medication, under the care of a specialist. We did an 8-day fast on her, and it dropped to 0.2, which is just like, it's better than mine probably. It's like hey, her asthma stopped at day 4. Okay, absolutely stopped. Clear. Lung function came up 25%. You're going, how does that happen? Gives you some confidence in what the body can do. And if you play with it this way, and you feed it good food, and you rest it at night, you give it a good rest, and you move it during the daytime, and you give it good exercise, there's nothing but the default thing is a smile on the dial, right? And that's what happens. That's what happens. So,
well, I can hear that as being completely logical, makes sense, because as you said, if 70% of our energy is actually used for digestion, and you don't digest, all of a sudden you got 70% to kind of
bonus. Right.
Yeah. Like, what's it going to do? As you said, it's going to start sweeping up and cleaning the corners, and it's kind of like, well, you'd expect some result. I didn't expect it to be that good, though.
No,
because that's outrageous.
And these are the things like I was at a conference, and at the conference I went to a specialty section for 3 hours on how to write better case reports, because I have a lot of nice things I like to write up and get into the literature so people can see what we're doing. And I'm not very good at it, so I thought, I'll take a polish up course here. And so I walk into the course, and there's this MD, PhD, very academic person leading the course, which made me feel even more inadequate. And there's this guy kind of puts his hand, he says, look, I'm over here at the True North Center. I'm the medical director there, and I'm an ER doc on the daytime shift, and the nighttime, I run this fasting clinic. And he said, we can't get published. And he says, well, tell me about what you're published. He says, well, we took 137 people with absolutely ballistic hypertensive problems, okay? And 137 people, we put them on a 10 to 15-day water fast in our clinic. And all 137 of them are off all medications and have normal blood pressure within 110 to over 70, and they're holding that at a year out. And he said, well, where are you trying to publish? He goes, well, Circulation, Journal of Hypertension. He says, you'll never get published. He goes, why? Well, those are journals that are paid for by the pharmacies that make the medication that control hypertension. Okay, so the review boards, while they can see that this is it's just not in their best interest to,
it's got to get out
the air under the wings of the airplane, and as opposed to it's just not going to work. So she, to her credit, she said, well, here's a back way to get into the search literature, and you go through this way, and you can publish it over here, but you won't get into those journals. Okay. Here's a guy that, he's an MD. He's published, he probably has 25 papers under his belt in regular types of research. This was an additional new front, particularly with the modality of fasting, and he couldn't get published. Okay. And so that's one modality. And then we have similar things like in cancer, in heart disease, in Alzheimer's, in all types of things like this that lead research right now is starting to give us a glimmer of doing this. But basically, we're talking about the hygiene of how we eat and how we don't eat, and what's normal
Mm.
What's abnormal? Well, what's abnormal is to eat 22% protein, 45% fat, 45 teaspoons of sugar, which is the average intake for a male and female in Australia and New Zealand per day, and 5 to 10 grams of fiber, as opposed to 10% protein, 10% fat, 80% carbohydrate, and I'd say zero sugar, except from fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds. Now, that type of diet, you can put those two apart, and you say, what happens? Well, one, you get heart disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, dementia, and the chronic degenerative diseases that are taking away 9 out of 10 people. And the other one, you don't, period. Okay, you just don't. So people get to make a choice. Well, how much of this can I do and still do that? You can't really. You have to. You're either entering it. Mediocrity will kill you in this. Okay, you can't live on on beer and pretzels all year and do a 10-day fast and think it's going to get you through. It won't. So it's an interesting thing. So we're at that point now in the science where we're saying, well, we're getting some information together. We're getting the background of research coming forward. We're getting good science with night and day metabolism and eating regimes and so forth, particularly out of Scripps La Jolla, UCLA, Walter Longo, Dr. Panda. These are people that are just leading the research, and as we watch them, we get greatly inspired in what we're doing by just doing simple fasting, by intermittently missing a meal now and then, maybe having 2 meals a day as opposed to 3, and going 18 hours occasionally without eating, or 16 hours without eating. It's like, oh, it's actually pretty good for us. Okay, provided you don't have any underlying medical conditions, that you're not diabetic or hypoglycemic or hypertensive, and going without your medications too. Because when you do get more efficient, okay, you shut down your digestive tract, but let's say you were taking a hypertensive medication, you actually get the hypertensive medication actually has an exaggerated effect on you. So, because you're more efficient at absorbing it and so forth. So, these are things that have to be controlled, and do not do a fast if you're on medications without speaking with a doctor who's knowledgeable in these areas and knows that. Because generally, the guideline is that you have to knock a lot of these medications, thyroid, cholesterol, hypertensive medications, beta blockers. You have to knock them down by about half, and they take, and I'm not qualified to do that as a chiropractor. Even with my training, I have a ballpark understanding, but I defer to my colleagues here that I have for helping regulate those things too. So, yeah.
So even for someone who's generally well and not on medication, you still advocate some medical supervision doing a fast?
No, not really. These are the good candidates for people who say, okay, well, Friday evening I have my meal, and I'm not going to eat till Saturday evening. And it's like, okay, there's great. Go out, have a nice workout in the morning, drink lots of water, have a little nap in the afternoon, and sit and slice and dice and have a nice meal in the evening. And it's not that hard because your backup systems are there. If you're going to do a marathon, probably not advised, okay? But for most people that they're doing just a light activity, an hour, 2-hour bike ride, I normally do 2 or 3 hours of activity on a Saturday morning, no problem. Out for a good surf or a nice mountain bike ride, not a problem. And plenty of energy on board. It's because you're eating a whole foods plant-based diet, you've got good stores of good glycogen in your muscles and things like that. When I work with my world-class athletes in cycling, it's like it's really funny because when they start eating right and they get the fat lower in their diet and they get the carbs up in their diet, they're eating whole plants again, they're eating chickpeas, they're eating beans, they're getting, broccoli and cauliflower and sweet potato and pumpkin on board. And they're going up the mountain that they've gone up 1,000 times before, and they're going, I just went up that mountain 2 gears different than I've ever gone up harder and went up 4 minutes faster. What's going on here? Is this stuff legal? I said, It's big broccoli. Yeah, it's legal. Okay. Do that. and it's like, because the muscle, the body can put in real food more efficiently. It can't put in peanut butter cups and Twinkies and biscuits and scones and things like that, white bread and pasta. It can't do that raw. It really spikes insulin, causes its own stress, and it's a lot of calories without a lot of nutrients in it. So when we start putting the nutrients together, there's an interesting thing. When you eat a whole foods plant-based diet, you're getting up to 60 times more vitamins and minerals in your food than the standard diet, okay? When you have a diet that's high centric in
That wasn't 60%, that was 60 times, wasn't it?
60 times, yeah.
60 times.
60 times, yeah. So when you eat a diet that's centric in meat, cheese, eggs, dairy, fish, low fiber, and high sugar, the nutrient content goes down. You're missing B12, folate, magnesium, potassium, all of these things that you need in huge amounts that come with real food. So this is why the whole foods supplemental system of nutrition works so well. All right. So when we do a fast and we're eating a whole foods diet, we're replete with minerals. We're not going to get into a starvation mode. Now, what is starvation compared to fasting? And that's an academic question for most people, but I'll tell you what the answer is that starvation is when you run out of base nutrient. You run out of B12, you run out of B1, you run out of potassium, you run out of things, and your heart starts skipping. These are signs of starvation, okay, when you're running out of it. But most people are replete with enough of the micro and macronutrients to go 20 to 40 days in a controlled circumstance without ever having a problem. Most people, we're talking about 7 or 8 out of 10 people can go that far. And the results that they get doing that are miraculous. We talked about, of course, the high blood pressure situation, but equally as impressive as getting up in the 70 to 80 percentile is diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Reversible, the pancreas is growing back, it's regenerating, these people are coming off all medications and stabilizing. So this is the new big thing is nothing, okay?
Well, it kind of fits into that whole swing against affluence around buying stuff to be happy, and kind of it makes perfect sense. It's kind of one of those flash of the bleeding obvious. Of course, I didn't need all those stuff, and I don't need all that food either. It's not going to make me happy. So tell us about the program you've got running.
Okay, well, on Thursday this week, which would be May 28th, 2020, we're going to be doing a hosted Zoom conference on a 3-day water fast. And so basically, every day at 11 o'clock, we get together for 30 minutes, and I tell you what's actually we're going to do that day and what's going to happen to your body. And you can, during anybody that's on the fast, I will talk to prior to make sure they're medically cleared to do this fast with me. And then, so we give them that, and then we also have that Q&A section after that too, that they can kind of diffuse that information between us. And as we've talked before, people get to share their ideas of what's happening. But the underlying thing that happens, because I've done this before, is that people go, that wasn't that hard. That wasn't hard at all. And in fact, because that guy could do it, I could do it. It was easy. So I hung in there, and it wasn't hard at all. And so people get that community support too. And so it takes 3 days of the fasting. So on a Thursday night, we have our last meal. Friday, we don't eat. Saturday, we don't eat. Sunday, we don't eat. But we get together every day at 11 o'clock. And then Sunday night, we have our first meal, which is fruit, okay? We have to open up that digestive tract very slowly. And a lot of times we heal things like leaky gut. We heal things like irritable bowel. We heal autoimmune disorders like thyroiditis because for the first time, we shut down that irritation to the gut. And now we're allowing it to grow back as it's never done before. You bite your cheek, right? And like 3 days later, no, the hole's gone. It's okay. Every 3 or 4 days, that thing completely replaces itself. Well, think of a sausage casing, okay? It's one cell thick. That's what your digestive tract is, okay? So it's turning over very quickly, and you're going to replace 30-40% of it in those 3 days. And now you're coming back with a new layer that makes your immune system much more effective. So then we do the day 3, the day 4 is as we reintroduce the correct foods during those days, not to rip up that digestive tract. You just can't go back to, a bowl of granola, okay? It doesn't work. Okay, you've got to do this correctly. And day 4 and day 5 and day 6, we get you back to a normal diet and hopefully keep you on a whole foods plant-based diet for quite a few weeks as you realize your body is so much more efficient as that bloom of bacteria comes back, and you have this wonderful experience of more energy, better sleep, less inflammation, less aches and pains if you had them. These are all things that happen as side effects of your body resetting to a new level of efficiency. And it's about efficiency. So in that 6 days, it's a 3-day fast, but it's a 6-day program. We do that, and there's a small price for that too.
So who's it best suited for?
It's best suited for a person who has been challenged by either pain, weight, or chronic conditions, and is not finding any real leadership there, and has an innate feeling in themselves that they can do something to help themselves. And this is a way that they can do it guided, professionally, and do that. I think that also the other aspect of people is people who are looking for the cutting edge technologies that want some valid leadership in that. Say, look, I'm an amateur athlete. I like to go out and run my marathons or do my cycle races or do whatever, how can I do it better? How can I make it less harmful on my body? How can I regenerate? How can I recover more quickly? That's another thing. The stamina that people have after this is incredible because their blood sugar is much more efficient. Okay, so they're realizing, gosh, I normally walk for an hour, but I walk for 2 hours. 5 days after my fast, I was just charging up that hill. I had one guy, he actually walked. He has a route where he walks 90 minutes roughly, and he knocked like 15 minutes off of his route. Okay, he goes, and I wasn't listening to AC/DC or anything. It was just like I just didn't get tired. And he says, I've done this thing for 2 years. I know what my pace is, and he is. So it's an interesting thing to see how people do that. So the average person will notice some distinct benefits to how efficiently they're doing afterwards, but it also, again, from that emotional, spiritual component is that they get some confidence that they're tuning up this device, okay? Now their head and their heart are kind of understanding that they can have a little bit of confidence in what this machine can do and how divine it is. It makes every chemical that there is known to man, and yet we don't even know half of it yet. So we have to kind of trust the innate. As a chiropractor, we say that we adjust the spine and the diet and the environment of the patient to allow the innate ability of the body to heal itself, to come forward. And that was written over 120 years ago. Okay, it's still valid today, and I think even more valid.
Yeah. So where can someone find out more? Your website?
starkhealth.com, all one word. And go there, go to the blog on there, read about it, read what other people had to say about it, go to the workshop or pricing and policy and sign up or get in touch and we'll tell you more.
Yeah, and my disclaimer is it's like I've been following this fasting thing for a while and I've had a few goes at it and it's like, wow, what you've said today is even blown me away even further with some of the actual stats behind it.
Yeah, like I say, I'm immersed in this stuff. I probably read into this maybe 6-8 hours a week, okay, and following the research. And it's like, it's a new field but at the same time, it's a confirming field of just how special we are, how unique we are. Okay, and like some of my best patients are veterinarians that understand, parrots and sheep and cows and horses, and they understand the marvel of what actually happens when a wound heals. And says, but every single one of them, when I ask them this question, is, what happens when an animal gets injured? It curls up and doesn't move for 3 days. Okay, 3-day fast. There it is. Okay, so these are interesting times right now, and looking forward to sharing more of that information with you, Geoff.
Well, I'm looking forward to joining in on the weekend. I'm excited about it. It'll be next week. Look out.
There we go. Yeah, it'll be fun, and we'll talk about next week what your experiences were too. I think that people following along with us will be interested to see what an unbiased approach assessment is, and because I'm kind of biased, I can say.
Well, I'm already sold, so I'm in.
Well, fantastic. And in the meantime, what projects do you have on? What are you working on?
About to launch another book. I've been tracking a lot of the trends around the coronavirus and the pandemic, and I think it's a time of great change and great opportunity. So I've been trying to identify what are some of those opportunities, and I just think it's like perfect opportunity for some people to actually make a change. And a lot of people there's a lot of evidence right now to say people are making small and large changes in their life. And I think that's as simple as they've been forced to stop and slow down and ground themselves. And by grounding themselves, they're actually coming out with a new outlook on life. So the whole fasting fits into that beautifully. It's a perfect time to stop and reflect and just see what's going on, because you might just want to either tweak something small, change something big.
Oh, I think you're so onto it right there. We'll talk about that next week, because I think that for me, you hit the nail right on the head. This is an opportunity, not a hindrance. And if we look at it that way, fasting is one of the tools, things like this, but sharpening the materials here, as opposed to looking out there for the answers, is I think what's really important. And as people kind of come to those grips and say, maybe conscious capitalism is a concept I better be aware of. Okay, maybe how I relate to myself and my people and in my society and my family and my community needs to take a look at it. Why am I running so hard when in fact the most precious thing is in fact the most precious thing?
Yep. I think that's spot on. I just think it's like if we only focused on health, there's a million really good reasons to do this, but it's actually bigger than health. It's kind of like, well, what do I want my life to be about? Because I'm not going to be around here forever. So while I'm here, I naturally want to make it as long as I can, but in the same way, I want to have the energy and the well-being to be able to do the things I want to do as well. So health is such a crucial thing, but it's only the starting point for all these other things that are available in life. And that's really what the opportunity is, to be best you, best life, all those wonderful things, best family.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Well, thank you for checking in with me again.
Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and your expertise, Patterson. And we'll go through it this weekend, and we'll talk more about it next week.
Okay, talk to you soon. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.